What's up, everybody? Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Going live tonight, 8 o'clock here on the East Coast. As you're watching us, if you're one of the folks that are in the chat on YouTube watching us here on the Inside Carolina channel, we're glad you're here. We are absolutely excited to be here, brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and Gruity. I am Joey Powell. With me, as always, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. We're going to do some, I guess, I don't want to go full psychoanalytical on the Tar Heels right now, but after we saw a week with them splitting, dropping a game to Alabama in which they were never really in the game. I don't care what the score says. They got it under 10 one time in the second half, but it never felt as if they were ever a real threat to Alabama for what Alabama wanted to do. And a lot of the things that we talked about last week on this show is exactly what Alabama did. North Carolina did not take care of the ball. North Carolina did not do things very effectively, very intentionally, and very cleanly, and it just got beat by a better team. And then they played Georgia Tech on Saturday at home, winning 68 to 65. Appreciate everybody who is here tonight that joined Rob Harrington and I for the postgame. Guys, I'm going to start here. Was Saturday the worst performance of all four of their recent games? I realized they won the game, but I felt like the performance, considering the opponent, was significantly worse than the other three. Sean, I'm coming to you first, man.
Yeah, I mean, just from a statistical, well, offensively, easily their worst performance, around 0.90 points per possession. So going into the game, they were, I believe, 12th in the country offensively, and this dropped them to, I think, 24th. So you're going in, also 15.5 point spreads, a pretty high spread. So all things considered, it tracked in terms of, at the end of the day, it was a win. But in terms of what you take away, there's a lot of concerns and worry, and probably everything that had been bubbling up, is now fully out in terms of the questions and concerns, and a lot of it, which I think had been stewing, felt exactly like 2 years ago in terms of a lot of the issues and watching the game and the things you're saying, especially offensively, around the lack of ball movement and people standing around. And it goes back to the same comments we had 2 years ago. I think they've tried different things. We talked about lineups last week, and they moved Drake Powell in on Alabama, and then Lubin on Saturday. So they did change some things, but 10 points in the first 10 minutes, another slow start to open both the first half and second half. So from an offensive standpoint, yeah, I'd say it was rock bottom, especially given that Georgia Tech has been struggling, and they were without two starters. So I think, once again, each game throughout the rest of the season is going to be stressful. And I think going into last week, in my mind, they weren't going to beat Alabama. Alabama's in that top tier that I thought they could not compete with, especially coming from Maui. But that the UCLA and Florida games would be extremely important. Reminds me of that Ohio State game 2 years ago. I think now those are probably even more challenging to an extent, but at the same time, they're still in front for potential Tier 1 wins, where Florida could be challenging, where they're ranked and how they shoot. But UCLA, I mean, if they lose to UCLA with everything UCLA did in the offseason, I think you might as well fold up shop for the season. But I know we'll get into what can they do differently, or what can be done. But yeah, Saturday was frustrating offensively. Defensively, I mean, they had one of their better games, but I think that goes to maybe the opponent and the lack of offensive prowess that they do have. I would say the one bright spot for me was Ian Jackson's playing time, getting close to 30 minutes in both games. I know he didn't shoot the ball as well on Saturday, but I think he's the one player with that size and quick burst that can create on his own and can get to the basket, and is a little more instant offense compared to everybody else. But overall, it was a struggle to get to that finish line.
Yeah, all valid points, Sean. I appreciate it. Shout out to the over 100 folks that are joining us live as we're doing this Sunday evening. If you're listening to this later on, we're still glad you're here. We're glad that you are putting the show into your regular rotation. Coast to Coast Podcast. I'm Joey Powell. Sherrell, I'm going to come to you next. That team that I saw on Saturday was probably the opposite of what I expected to see with regard to their energy level, their focus, but more importantly, their confidence. How does this team get their confidence back? I think Rob made a really good point in the post game where he said it looks like this team has realized that what they want to do isn't working, and now they're not really sure of anything, and they're incredibly. He didn't say this, but I'm saying what I'm seeing. It looks as if they're kind of fragile right now, and that they just don't have any confidence in the ability to do a lot of basic things, and it manifests itself looking like what it looked like against Georgia Tech. Sherrell, how can this team get some confidence back?
Well, I'm gonna start, Joey. You said there's over 100 people joining us. How many of them saw that it was an Inside Carolina Live podcast and thought, "Oh, there's a football coach. Let me run right here real quick," and then they
Oh,
see
we're,
our
we're,
three
gonna- we're
mugs.
going to talk about that in a second. Don't
They
don't
see our,
don't head fake them.
no,
We'll
no.
get
I'm just
there.
saying they see our three mugs and they're like, "Oh,
Oh,
oops,
womp
never
womp.
mind." Yeah.
Yeah.
How this team gets their confidence back? I think, well, one, you have to ask yourself, did they really have confidence? Like, the second half against Kansas was really good. They overwhelmed American, who is not a great team, and then they had to fight and claw to get back against Dayton. Same thing with Michigan State. So, like, I don't know how confident this particular unit as a team actually has been. I think the individual players have probably lost confidence over time in the last, I guess, 3 weeks. But you get it back by, honestly, it just sounds simple. You get it back by just playing better and doing your assignment and trying not to do too much. I think it's the ultimate folly of some of these highly trained, highly conditioned athletes that when someone isn't doing what they're supposed to do, well, I'll just make up for it and do what they're doing, and that'll help the team. That's not necessarily what the team needs. They need for each person to have a defined role that they clearly understand, and then they need to execute that role. And I think there at times, I don't think I know at times that there are people who don't fully understand their role, or maybe they understand it and they're just choosing not to do what they're asked to do. I think it's pretty clear that there's a disconnect between what the coaching staff is asking folks to do, and I'm not absolving them of any blame either, but between what they're asking folks to do and what's happening on the court. So to get the confidence back, I think they need to, just get a little practice. One, they haven't had a ton of practice time, and then you just got to win games. And again, we're gonna sound like a broken record because we've said this every single week, and we'll continue to say it every week. But everything with this team starts with their defense. I think it is the single most important thing for UNC to be able to now maintain its status as kind of a fringe NCAA team. We've recalibrated from where we were a couple of weeks ago, and I think now it's a situation where it's like, can they make the tournament? I still think they can, but it's going to have to start on the defensive end. So I think that's where I'm at. Play good defense, which will give you energy, which will fuel your offense, and that can help with confidence. But there are some schematic things and just some personnel things that just aren't going to change. So it's up to the coaching staff. They have a week off, again, to figure out what's the best way for this team to play, and are they doing it right now, or does it need to be something else?
Sean, do you feel like they should stick with the run game? Because I've seen a team that looked really good in fits and starts this season so far. And Sherrell's point is one that I've been married to as well since the first game, is that if they don't defend, it kind of nullifies what they want to do with tempo and kind of speeding the game up. So I'm asking you, should this team still look to run if they're not able to create as many perimeter turnovers, or if they're not able to force the opponent into the type of the type of offense and the type of tempo that they want to run? Should they still try to be an up and down team?
My only answer is yes. I think one thing from a defensive standpoint, obviously they've never been great at forcing turnovers, which allows you to get into transition. They did during that run with Trimble to an extent, but you look at this team in the half court, and in terms of, I think they're top five in the country in terms of how quickly they're getting a shot up. So they are continuing to get shots up quickly, but I think if you get in the half court set, we haven't seen. Last week we talked about connectivity, both offensively and defensively. We haven't definitely didn't see that on Saturday, and that was one of the concerns was, eh, hey, Elliott's gonna try to force pressure, and if not, okay, maybe there's an off-ball screen to get RJ the ball. Now it's his turn. So I think the more you're playing in the half court, at least as of right now, the more struggles you're going to have to get contest, get open shots and to create looks. So for me, yes, continuing to get out into transition is important, but I think in the half court set, I think trying to run more. I saw it in the comments, more set plays. I know they are obviously running plays, but I think we saw once again RJ curl around and come up for a three, and there are certain situations where you could tell, hey, here's what they're doing. I think more often than not, after that first attack maybe doesn't happen. If the ball's on the left side, just look at the right side, and those two guys are just standing there, obviously waiting for maybe a driving kick or whatever it is. But you look at a team like UConn offense, right? There's always they're putting pressure on every single position, and I think that's what they're missing right now to be able to slow it down and run half court offense. You go back to the tournament run, you did feel like everybody was clicking on all cylinders from the coaching staff in terms of the plays they're calling. The players, the ball was moving quickly, and now a lot of it is dribble, try to go one-on-one, and Elliot Cadeau can get by anybody he wants, but shorter of stature. So it's really only Ian Jackson that you could put in this pro-style offense to get to the basket and finish, in my mind. So I think a lot of it goes to, if they are in the half court, what can they do differently in terms of set plays, and if they are slowing it down, making sure that they're slowing it down properly and efficiently from that play calling perspective.
Sherrell, you had something you wanted to add on the back of that?
I think a part of it is, and I might be stepping on something you might get to later with Joey, but I'm gonna segue, I guess. But I think a part of it is we were talking about like, the effort and everything. I found over the years that oftentimes, and this goes back to what you were saying about confidence, Joey, when teams start talking about effort, they got to play harder, they got to play more intensely. That's a team who's not quite sure what's going on, and like you said, they're frazzled because we can all say, yeah, intensity, effort, but a lot of times it's just people not understanding what is happening, and in the absence of knowing what's going on or why things aren't working, they go to cliches and they go to that kind of thing of effort, energy, toughness, that kind of thing. So I think what they've got to do is kind of figure out exactly who they want to be, how they want to play, and then maximize the strengths of the guys who are going to play moving forward. Because I think we said it last week too, like they all know what was expected of them this season. They say they don't read, but they read. They know they're supposed to be top 10. They know they weren't supposed to lose 4 games before Christmas or even December. Basically, they know that now they're running out of chances to have really quality wins, and they know what's happened in the past, especially RJ Davis. When you get off to a start like this, it's very hard to climb out of that hole. So all that stuff gets magnified each game. So when you get down to Alabama, it gets magnified, and then you're coming out in a game that we all expected you to win, that it looks like they came out just expecting to win, and Georgia Tech's up 3 or 4 in the second half, and it's like, oh no, is this happening again? So I think that's what you're seeing when you talked about frazzled or lack of confidence, is that they understand what this is and what this means, and that's pressure, and pressure can be tough for a lot of people to handle.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are curious too, and it's obvious that the coaching staff is trying to adjust. You can look and see that they're tinkering a little bit with starting lineups and when who goes in where, that they're trying to adjust some things on the fly. I think one of the things that's really gapped this up for North Carolina recently is the Elliot Cadeau that was on the floor yesterday, or against the Elliot Cadeau that was on the floor against Georgia Tech does not look like the same Elliot Cadeau that we saw prior to the trip to Maui. I'm not sure what's going on there. Sherrell, do you think that there's something they can do to get Cadeau back to where he was? Because I see him still trying to create. I think he's probably pushing himself a little bit more to try to create, and he might be gripping a little bit. But I'm seeing a guy that doesn't look like he's having fun the way he was, especially at the beginning of this year, and here we are only 7 games in.
Well, Sean mentioned 2 years ago. I was thinking back to 3 years ago. I think it was maybe the Appalachian State game where Brady Manick just kind of, this is Hubert Davis' first season, where Brady Manick just kind of went off in the post game. Was like, yo, we're too talented. We have too many McDonald's All Americans to be playing this way. Um, and it feels like it was joyless then. I've heard people say listless, joyless, whatever adjective you want to use, but I think a part of that is it again, I know I talk about systems and um, cycles and all that stuff, but it feels like if you're having a good time on the court and the ball's moving and everybody's eating, so to speak, then it's a lot easier to play defense, and that helps with your confidence and that helps with your running game. It feels like everything is always all connected with this particular team. So I thought about that just first off with the lack of joy and how that it's kind of happened 3 of the 4 years now. The first year, the NIT year, and now you're seeing it a little bit this season as well. As far as Cadeau is concerned, I wonder if there's, could there be something else going on? I'll share. There's me and Joey were texting privately, and it's just like, what's happened post Maui or Maui on, because he looks just different. And the only explanation I can give is just it's that pressing. It's not full court press, but pressing as in trying to do too much, trying to uh, uh, I think Hubert Davis said they were trying to make a 14-point shot one time when they were down by 14. It's too much of that. Like, you can't hit a home run, so to speak. I'm mixing my sports cliches, but you can't hit a home run every single at bat unless you're Shohei Ohtani, and he's different. But the goal should be make the simple play, make the right play, and as you build, then you can start going from some of those, for some of those home runs for the grand slam, so to speak. But just make contact. That's what North Carolina needs to do right now. Just make contact, play the short game, steal second, manufacture runs. That's how they have to play right now until they can get back to where they were 3 weeks ago, which was kind of a pretty dynamic offense. And we just haven't seen that really in the last 3 games. And that is opponent adjusted too, because it's not like, again, Georgia Tech was without 2 starters, and it's not like they were a great team to start with. So the offensive, I would say, struggles isn't just because they played a great team like Alabama. They struggled against a much worse team in Georgia Tech. So you would think it's a Carolina issue, not who they're playing.
Man, you said a lot there, and I don't just mean word selection or how long you talked. I mean, there was a lot in that, and I hope folks can pull some stuff out of that because Sherrell's right. Like it does seem like something's different with how this team is interacting, but specifically just how Cadeau is driving things. And it wasn't that way prior to Miami. Maybe the losses shell shocked him. Who knows? Sean, I'm seeing some things in this team right now that schematically I think could be improved. You alluded to a couple of them. I want to make sure to say I appreciate the 200 folks that are in the chat right now, and I'm glad they're here. I want to see if you might be able to open up a little bit of a Pandora's box and help us understand what could be better for this team in the half court. I've seen them completely abandon trying to run anything through the post because, as we've talked about since last spring, they're not going to they're losing Armando Bacot, and that's kind of antithetical to what North Carolina's offense has been for a long time. Considering that they still have Jalen Washington on the floor or on the roster, they still have Van Allen Lubin, who has proved that he can get a dunk for you on a drive and dish. I'm not sure why they're not trying to do a little more in the post. Do you feel like there are some fixes that could be added in with that as LaSalle comes to town after a week off?
Yes, to an extent. I mean, the stat yesterday when the guards had scored all the points, right now the bigs have almost been rendered useless to an extent. But I think it goes to whoever is in the game, what is their strength. I think we know it's not Washington catching on the run or catching in traffic unless it's a handoff to him for a dunk. But I'm gonna go back to the face him up, catch and shoot. Just give it to him once or twice early on and let him try to establish himself. Van Allen Lubin, he's not the catch and shoot guy, but can you look to get him in the post or in a pick and roll where Elliot's going to drive hard right and lob it up, so you know exactly what the end situation can be. But I mean, not having that post presence is challenging, and the talent level is not there to fully recreate something like if you did have a Armando where you're just ignoring him. But now, hey, let's throw it down low and let him do a move. So I do think it's taking, and this is across the board. I think as they try to either redefine roles or be more specific on roles of, all right, guards. This is where you're trying to locate Jalen or Van Allen Lubin or Withers in these exact situations, and outside of that, you know, almost telling them don't not to pass it to them, but these are the few situations we want to try to maximize from the bigs, and then that is a huge issue that is going to be there all season. But right now, from the outside, the guard perspective, the outside shooting, 20%, less than 20% over the past two games. The 2 threes in the first half, or less than that, really from Maui, I think is the bigger concern. And I think we all thought Cade Tyson was going to be an answer to play with RJ, which I kind of want to touch on Cade a little bit later, but that's been the huge issue is the lack of 3-point shooting and the volume that they've been shooting the last two games, where it's just, once again, unless you're Ian Jackson and able to create and get to the basket, it's very challenging to get good looks. And even when they are getting good looks, right now, they're in the 10th percentile from unguarded catch and shoots. So,
but even then, and I hear you, Sean. I want to see if I might be able. Maybe I'm trying to solve this too easily. But I mean, if you had one of the bigs post, why not trigger him, throw him an entry pass? And this team has been pretty woeful on entry passes the last few years, but why not at least try to get it in his hands and then let him kick it right back out, or let him reverse it through the post? Because if nothing else, you're forcing the defense to recognize that you're not playing 3-on-5. I think that might be the thing that's a little curious. I saw somebody, and it might have been on Inside Carolina's message board, so if somebody's listening and I'm not attributing this to you, forgive me. I did not note a name. But even to think about the way some NBA teams do, and the Bulls used to do this with Horace Grant and Bill Cartwright, of just trying to get them an open shot early in the game. UNC did it with Deion Thompson in 2009. They would absolutely drop the ball to Deion, let him take the first shot of the game, because if nothing else, it forces the defense and forces your opponent to recognize that, okay, this guy's at least going to shoot. We talked about this last year and some this year about the threat of shooting is sometimes just as good as hitting shots. I think they've, at least looking in this past week, they've totally abandoned trying to shoot in the post. So tell me, is that something that can be tweaked with just a couple of installs? Or are we just kind of stuck with, all right, we're working it around the perimeter, and if it doesn't work and we can't get a lane to drive through, that's it?
Well, I think what you're saying, the 3-on-5, that's been the biggest issue, what we talked about last week in terms of the shot makers and the ability to score compared to that, last year, once again, in that Duke game where whoever you have on that starting lineup could score. So, yeah, I mean, once again, if Jalen Washington's in the game, go to that 10-foot, go to that 10-foot jump shot. Tell him, Jalen, this is what we're doing. This is what we want out of it. I think you have to be that specific. We don't want a three-pointer. We want the 10-foot face and shoot jump shot, which is, pretty much unblockable and unguardable when he's on. And then Van Allen Lubin, a little more raw, but I mean, he had some big games for Vanderbilt, one of them against Florida, where he did a lot of damage in the post. And I think if you get him on the, get him on the left block, let him go to that left shoulder and the right hand, and at least, to your point, you are forcing something different or forcing the defense to react. And there's no, you're not losing anything by doing it, given what we did see, the pass backs around the perimeter and the lack of looking inside. So those would be the two areas where I would want to see them get involved. Or if it is a pick and roll, hard roll to the rim, and there's the lob that's going to come, or here's the fast drive that's going to happen and the dish off, versus trying to, turn the corner and hit them as they're still rolling, or a bounce pass, and we know that they're not going to be able to handle that. So I think it is very specifics, but you do make a good point of, hey, let's try to establish this, or at least showcase that we are going to do something a little different here.
Sherrell, I've seen these guys, again, as they're trying to get used to each other, they're trying to get used to a different style of offense. They're trying to find some connectivity. I've seen these guys look at times, where they're just they just look dumbfounded at what the other player is doing. Like they look like they don't understand what their teammates are doing. Is there a way that they can lean on maybe some veterans, or is there a way they can simplify um, just little things, right? And I know I'm sounding really really out of left field here, and like I'm trying to force this, but it makes sense in my head. What can they do to kind of get that confidence back? As you said earlier, and you said this really well, so I want to maybe can we dig in there a little bit? What can they do that are little things that can get them some confidence back? Because I'm seeing a guy that's played 5 years of college ball miss alley oop dunks, and then looks confused after it happened. I know he's better than that. He may not be a Naismith candidate, but I know that there are players on this team that are better than they are playing. What can guys do as individuals to help get the team as a collective out of this funk?
Well, I mean, I hate to answer this way, but I think that starts with coaching. Like
That's
that's,
allowed. You can say
I
something
mean,
negative about coaching.
that is what if you put like the definition of coaching in a dictionary, it kind of be what you just said, which is like put your guys in the best position to succeed based upon their skill sets, talents, and abilities. And I don't think that's necessarily happening right now. To Sean's point, offensively and defensively, you just look at some of the things of what each individual guy does well. Jalen Washington, perfect example. Obviously, not playing the best, not playing well. Defense is really a struggle for him. But what does he do well? We've talked about it for 3 years. He catches the ball in the post, he faces up, and he shoots over you, and he makes it a lot. Has he taken that shot more than twice this season, if that many? I think so. That's his skill. That's what he does the best, and he's not been put in the position to or given the ball to do that. So I think my first answer would be is that's a coaching staff issue more than anything. Is that they've got to, and I'm sure they're trying. I'm sure they're working on it, but they've got to figure out a way to make these guys mesh within the constructs of their system while also accentuating each individual's best abilities and skills. So how do they do that? I mean, I think a lot of that happens in practice. As far as the players are concerned, to me, it goes back to stop pressing, stop trying to do too much, and do, if you have a coherent plan from the coaching staff, which we all think they do what they ask you to do, and more often than not, it'll work out. So I think, like, stop trying to do too much, stop trying to quote unquote take over. Like, there's no Kobe's on this team. Like, you don't need to go into Kobe mode and take 70 shots, or you don't need to go into Kobe mode and try to be the hero. Just, I hate to use another cross sport cliche, but when you're playing a Paul Johnson offense, Joey, what do they tell the defense every single time?
Head on a swivel, do your assignment. Like
Do
if your job is the pitch, play the pitch. If your job
right,
is the ball, play the ball.
right. Now basketball obviously is a little more improvisational than football, but I still believe at the core that that's the way it should be. So whatever you're supposed to do that, and I think that will help a ton with just guys being in the right place, and someone throwing a pass, and a guy rejecting the screen versus taking the screen and going a different way. All those things. If you just do what you're supposed to do, I think that kind of stuff usually works itself out. So a long-winded way of saying I think it's coaching and making sure that they need to put guys in position to succeed, and then guys just gotta do their job and trust that the other person is going to do their job. Because sometimes when you are trying to do too much, it's because, like, oh, Sean's not going to be able to talk about points per possession like he should, so I'm going to handle points per possession. When in reality, Sean's got it. He's good. So just trust him to do his job, and everything should be fine.
Sean, is there anything personnel-wise you'd like to see differently? You mentioned earlier Cade Tyson, who has seemed unplayable at times this year. Um, considering that things aren't really working the way you would expect with this collection of players, is there something you'd like to see personnel-wise? Is it more minutes for Ian Jackson? Is it more minutes for Drake Powell, who finally got a start this week? Um, or who started both games this week? But is there something personnel-wise you'd like to see to maybe shake things up, or maybe get them out of the stagnant place that they're at, where it looks stale, it feels stale, it smells stale, and I think the guys are recognizing that it's coming off as stale. Give me some personnel thoughts.
All right, so I have two iterations of the kind of a crazy thought. So last week talked about in terms of starting lineup. Would love to see Ian in there, but I knew they weren't going to do anything with the 3 guards last week. But Drake and Van Allen Lubin should be in, and they made those changes that didn't really do anything. So I've been going back and forth in terms of who should be the lead guard. And I think obviously Cadeau in one situation or Trimble. So I'm going to go starting lineup A right now. So Trimble, he's been the most consistent player all season. And then Ian Jackson at the 2, just with the size and his ability to create, and I think the most talented offensive player on the team. I know he has defensive shortcomings, but he's working hard. He's just not there in terms of exactly knowing where to be. But offensively, shooting guard, definitely hasn't earned it, but put Cade Tyson at the 3 for a game or two where all the teams going forward, even Florida to an extent, not as worried about the athletic deficiencies he has faced so far, and we knew that would be his issue. And you're paying him a good sum of money from NIL, and you're not getting anything from him. You might not get anything from him the rest of the year, but at least try to force the issue a little bit where if he is able to get off, more than 1 3, you can at least see is there something there. And you can't just let him stand in the corner and hope the ball comes to him, but put him on the left wing, use him in a flare screen, drive to that side. If he's covered, pump fake, 1 dribble jump shot, put him in. You give him a few minutes to try to force the issue, but then you're having some size and shooting on the outside. And once again, it could be a quick hook, or you don't have to play him in the second half if it's not working. But so and then you have Drake and Van Allen Lubin. And Drake, you got to get him more on cuts, more on more off the ball actions, and then Van Allen Lubin just from the size. And you look at the offensive rating, and it's still up there. So I think that lineup, once again, you can't do much worse than they have done over the first 10 minutes. So that's kind of the position I'm coming from. Now, obviously, RJ, are you gonna ever bench RJ? Probably not, but he's shooting the highest volume and shooting a horrendous percentage and can't get it going. Elliot Cadeau. The reason I thought about starting him was just I think he still can create easier shots for a Drake or for others or the driving kick, but as well as from an emotional standpoint, it might not be the best to bring him off the bench, but at some point you got to play the guys that are producing the best, and also you got to try to bring Tyson. I mean, if you're just going to play him 2 minutes a game, then it is what it is, but at least try to force the issue with him and see if you can get anything going, knowing that the athletic deficiencies are not going to be as vast as they were against Alabama or Auburn, a team that was going to try to target him every time.
I mean, because that's a huge part of the season. The story of the season thus far is that, Cade Tyson, when we interviewed him back in April, he was like, yeah, I'm going to play some 3, but, I'm happy to play the 4, whatever the team needs, et cetera, et cetera. So you start forming up lineups in the offseason, and it's like, well, Cade Tyson should be able to play the 4. That gives you a really balanced lineup of Tyson and Withers at the 4. In retrospect, I know that sounds not great, but in April, it was like, okay, they can work with that. And then at the 5.
That was the plan.
Yeah, and then at 5, you've got Washington and Lubin, both who have different skill sets, so maybe they complement each other. And then you've got the 1 through 3 with, kind of the more dynamic players. And so the theoretical depth chart fit very well. But when now you move into actual games, not quite a third of the season, like 28% of the season is over. And, Withers is kind of done what he's done since he's been at Carolina, and I guess most of his career is to be up and down. For a half, he'll look like an NBA player, and then for the next half, he looks like he can't play for I need to switch Cumberland County High Schools. Looks like he can't play for Pine Forest. So, that's kind of what you're going to get. And then Cade Tyson, as everyone has said, and I was horribly, horribly, horribly wrong because I thought 6'7" shooter, size, shooting is going to translate, but he can't get on the floor. So then you've lost the 2 guys who you thought would be kind of your starting 4s, and that's put so much stress on the rest of your rotations, on Jackson and Powell and Trimble, because they're all slotting down a spot essentially now, where you've got Trimble and Jackson are essentially your 3s, and Powell is your 4. And even in the offseason, as talented as Drake Powell is, that's a big ask for someone who was playing at Northwood last year at 6'6", 205, to be a starting four in the ACC against some of these bigger guys. So I think, to your point, Sean, it's like just give Tyson like 15 minutes and just see what happens. It might be awful. It might confirm that, hey, he's not going to play the rest of the season, but just see what happens, because right now there's just so much stress on Trimble, Davis, Cadeau, Powell, Jackson, right? Just there's just so much stress on them. And then James Brown too. I mean, he's one of the guys. If you're trying out bigs, why not? I mean, in the offseason, again, not to belabor the point, but we all said, like, hey, if you can set a screen and rebound, there's going to be minutes for you at Carolina. And Ty Claude, against maybe the best opponent Carolina's going to play all year, he showed that he can do that, and he got minutes. He didn't play Saturday, obviously, because he was hurt, but why not? You just see what you have, and if it confirms what you already know, great. But maybe there's something else there that you just haven't exploited yet.
See, that personnel talk is why this is your favorite podcast. I think that analyzing that top to bottom, and I think the James Brown point is an incredibly salient one. If you trust him enough to give you energy in the first half of the game, why didn't you use him in the second half when you were dealing with foul trouble and Jalen Washington's ankle and all those other things? It's obvious that the coaching staff is not getting what they want out of these guys right now. So maybe see where energy gets you, and that James Brown will bring that. Ty Claude showed against Alabama he's at least going to bring effort into the game. So if you can utilize those guys, utilize them. Go ahead, Sherrell.
And if that's what you're going to say in the post game, is that it's not just Hubert Davis, but the players said it too. It's like, oh, the energy wasn't there, the toughness wasn't there. I think that's a crutch, like I said earlier. But if you're going to say that, then give everybody a chance to show what they can do as far as energy. It might not work, it might not, but what you're doing isn't really working either. So why not?
Look for energy. That's the thing. Look for energy.
And I know Claude, he couldn't play last game, but when it does come to the bigs, we talked about it before, from the screen setting perspective, at least he has that football player body where he's going to at least slow down that opposing defender, and it's not just going to be an easy double team as it is currently, because, I mean, you look on the flip side, Michigan State, for example, at the beginning, they're just utilizing the screen in different positions, and it was just freeing up the guard to do what he wanted or put the pressure, if the player was icing, if the big was dropped, whatever that situation is, like, it at least creates that half a second advantage for a Cadeau or Davis, etc., to be able to become a little more decisive versus having to backstep, pick up their dribble, and now you're freelancing and trying to do something that this type of team should not be doing.
Yeah, I don't think you're also going to root Ty Claude out of the way as easily as you might some other folks. Like, it's the dude's, he's got a little bit of grown man in him. He looks like he's kind of ready to fight. And how many times have we heard Hubert Davis say something about he liked or didn't like his team's fight? Ty Claude's proven that the minutes he's getting, he's going to do that. Like, you're not going to get an easy rebound with him in the game if he's nearby. I think it's important. I do want to make sure that I share a little bit of information around the football coaching search. You guys might notice that we're doing a live show tonight, and there's a lot of potential around who's UNC's next football coach is going to be. I can go ahead and tell you right now, as we're live at 8:40 on Sunday evening, that whoever the new coach is, he's going to love going to Johnny T-shirt. And I can confirm that Sean Moran is not a candidate for the job. But I can tell you, you can go to Johnny T-shirt and you can find whatever it is you need to load up on your wardrobe as you've become the new head coach for UNC football. Maybe you like to wear hoodies. Maybe you like to wear hoodies in different temperature weather. Go to Johnny T-shirt. I promise you they can hook you up right now at Johnny T-shirt. JohnnyT-shirt.com. They are doing their 12 days of Christmas. You heard me talk about it last week, but they're doing their 12 days of Christmas, which means every single day they're putting some huge discounts on inventory of different styles and different types. And it was hats the other day. Maybe they'll do hoodies. Who knows? But Johnny T-shirt's where you need to go. Go ahead and take care of that very special Tar Heel fan in your life. If you want to go see them, go to East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Spend some time with the staff. I promise you, you will never feel better about a retail shopping experience than you will from going to Johnny T-Shirt. Inside Carolina premium subscribers know you get that extra 10% off the top if you use the code that's on the premium message boards. And if you're a premium message board user and a premium IC subscriber right now, you probably know there's a lot of things going on. So why not go ahead and do that? If you're not a premium subscriber, go ahead and do it now. Get that for yourself for Christmas. I promise you, especially times like this, it will be the best investment you ever make in your fandom. Real briefly, as we're on the video version, we're going to keep going, but there will be an ad that drops in right here for the national advertisements that we like to run that keep this show on. But we want to make sure that you guys stick around. This is the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. We'll be right back. Thank y'all for sticking around. We appreciate you being a part of this here show. Coast to Coast rolls on a Sunday evening. We are live on the East Coast. Almost 270 of you guys in the chat tonight. If you're looking for UNC football coaching information, sorry, we already talked about that. We will get back to we will certainly break that news as soon as we are cleared to break that news at Inside Carolina. So get those notifications on. But while we're here, talking a little basketball, talking a little UNC, Sherrell, let's do some recruiting for a second. Let's go to recruiting. We'll pivot to that. We'll talk a little bit there, and then we'll come back and maybe take some questions for some folks in the audience. But hit me up with what you know about UNC's current recruiting targets that we can share with the audience.
Yeah, it's a similar update. Well, I guess one is finally coming to a close, but the updates are similar. So, AJ Dybantsa, the number one player in the 2025 class. Eric Bossi, who's the 24/7 Sports National Director of Recruiting, interviewed him Friday, and he confirmed that he's going to make an announcement as regards to his college decision this week. Don't have a date yet. Think it'll be earlier in the week, but that's kind of the word, is that he's going to announce a decision this week. He has a formal top 4 of Kansas, BYU, our wonderful friends down in Tuscaloosa, and UNC. So those are the 4 schools he will choose among. And, we'll kind of see what happens. I would anticipate it'll be a fairly large announcement covered by a lot of people, because he's a very big deal. He's going to be the highest paid NIL athlete thus far ever since NIL started. He's number one player in the class, presumptive number 1 pick in the 2026 NBA draft. So it's a big deal, and we'll see where he goes in a few 4, 5, 6 days, something like that. Then Caleb Wilson is North Carolina's other target, another top 10 guy in 2025. He has the top 5 of UCF, Tennessee, Ohio State, North Carolina, and our blue-blooded friends down in Lexington, the Wildcats of Kentucky. And he told Travis Branham a few weeks ago that he was going to narrow down that 5 into a top 2. We think that'll happen relatively quickly. And kind of the word is that North Carolina is expected to be included in that top 2. Where it goes from there, we're not sure, because he said he wants to make a decision sometime between mid-December and mid-January. And I guess today is December 8th, so we're not quite at mid-December yet, but we're close. So really, both of these guys, one's coming off the board next week, and the other could really at any time in the next month or so.
Heck of a rundown, man. I know North Carolina fans are probably tired of waiting for these two guys and tired of waiting for an announcement around a football coaching search. But, hey, waiting is the hardest part. Shout out to Tom Petty. Rest in peace. So let's take some questions from the folks here in the chat as we're doing this live. We've got a couple of good ones. And Sean, I think this one's right up your alley. Charlie Shaw has asked a couple of good ones tonight, but I'm going to take this one. He mentions the fact that what North Carolina has put on tape so far is making it easy for teams to really just press out on the guards and really kind of lean into the perimeter. I think, I made the point earlier about North Carolina having to play 3-on-5. Do you think that maybe what North Carolina has done already this year has made such an easy scout for the other team? And is that something that's I guess, can be fixed on the fly, mid-season?
Not sure it could be fixed on the fly, but I think it goes to especially early on, the teams that are known for doing prep. And once again, from a Auburn perspective, obviously the talent gap was different, but I'm sitting right behind Pearl Jr. and he's ripping through the plays of the Dayton game, and then you watch the game and they're going to Broome first few possessions, but then they know exactly what Carolina's trying to do offensively, where to bump them a little bit, as well as defensively, just run them around a few screens. So I think the tape is out there, and especially when it comes to a Florida or UCLA, teams will often watch the last five games, so you don't have to look too far to see exactly what has worked and how you want to play this team. So I think it does go to your point of trying to utilize the bigs differently. I think there is a limit, obviously, on what you can do with them, but they're playing they do have some strength, so try to utilize them. Or are there other areas to get guys shots? And I think we have seen Ian Jackson, as I mentioned, get the almost 30 minutes a game, and he has been that bright spot of being able to create on his own, not be afraid of the moment. But I do think from a UNC perspective, you are able to shake things up a little bit. But teams know it's the big three to an extent, and the big three also has not been playing like a big three, which makes the scout a little easier for it to come to fruition.
Want to kind of push that a little bit further, Sean. I appreciate the answer. I think that North Carolina has shown the proclivity to want to make some tweaks. I mentioned earlier, Hubert Davis is giving more minutes to Ian Jackson, which you guys referenced earlier in the show. He's tweaked with the starting lineup a little bit. Do you dare think that maybe it is one of these things where he pulls R.J. Davis aside and just lets him watch for a little bit, or is that completely submarining everything they've got because R.J. is such a leader?
Last week I would have agreed with that, and I think from a just a perspective, like it's extremely tough to either bench or pull aside your McDonald's All-American that came back and everything is expected.
For sure.
Right. But at this point in time, I don't think – I think you have to be a little more willing to either decrease the minutes, try to create other shot attempts, because right now you just look at the 73 pointers, 24%. I think we've all thought he's going to work his way out. But the team makeup is just so different than it was, that he's basically playing at a freshman year level, and I think that is hurting the team to an extent. But also, who is taking the is anybody else able to take some of those shots? So when I was kind of going with a crazy idea of who are you putting in the starting lineup, I think it is having to try to reduce those shot attempts, or reduce what he is doing. Now, he's still had a great assist to turnover ratio, so he's been taking care of the ball better than others, but you can't continue to have that drastic difference, which we did see 2 years ago with Caleb Love, especially when he would go, some of the 4 for 18 games. You can't win like that. So for RJ, still let him, take the threes. Once again, I think we talked about that, the yellow line where he took a few in Maui, making sure those are eliminated or coming a little closer. But maybe he's looking for his pull-up jump to get to his pull-up jump shot a little bit more, where he is more automatic versus trying to get in to that six feet and closer, and shooting a low percentage in the paint. So I think really with everybody, it's little tweaks that are the most realistic, and that can be focuses for each player to try to do a little differently.
Sherrell, I don't mean this to sound like you're Pollyanna, because you're not. I think you're incredibly realistic. I want to ask you this. What's something that this team can do this week to help get some of the confidence back, to help get guys back mentally? I know it's an exam week. I know they're going to be doing probably a lot of running and shooting, might be taking a day or two off to let themselves heal. What's something that you'd like to see, or you'd like to hear that this team has done this week to hopefully try to ground them or get them back in a better spot mentally and emotionally?
You said exam week, and I was triggered a little bit. JOMC 164.
Sorry.
Media
Yikes.
law.
I'll mail some blue books to your house.
Yeah, I mean, we're old because they don't have that number system anymore. But back in the day,
yeah.
it was JOMC 164. And I struggled big time. This is going to sound cliche, but it's the same thing I think we've said over the last 4 or 5 years when this has happened. Like, just have fun, man. You put in too much work and too much effort and spend too much time in the gym to go into the game and not have fun and not enjoy it and for it to be almost like a job. I understand that it is for a lot of people, and that they feel like this is kind of, their way out, or their way to wealth, or to playing at the ultimate level. But it's supposed to be fun. It's a game. Enjoy it. And I think too often Rob calls it, I think in one of the podcasts, getting lost in the competitive spirit in a very Rob Harrington way. And I think there hasn't been enough of folks getting lost in the competitive spirit of basketball. It's just been like a grind, and that is a theme I think we've seen over the last 4 years, is that when this particular system of Hubert Davis isn't flowing well, when there's not movement, it looks like this. We kind of know what it looks like. We've identified there's not a lot of movement. There's bad shots. There's lots of dribbling. There's kind of chemistry concerns, even though it might not actually be chemistry. It might just be guys not connecting and playing well. So to me, that's what they have to do, is just go back and say, all right, man, the majority of the preseason, or the beginning of the season was not what we wanted. It wasn't great. But look back at when Carolina was playing its best, even against Kansas when they were down 20, against Dayton when they were down 20, against American when they were up by 70. They're having fun. They're enjoying it. It's a good time. It's not a grind. So to me, that's what I would say. It's just like, get back in there and hoop. Like, enjoy it. It's cool. It's fun. You're playing at UNC. You get free Jordans. You get free everything. You're probably making decent money. Like, have fun. Let the pressure go, and just go out and play basketball. It's easier said than done, but that should be the message. And I think if you let some of that weight of like, oh no, here we go again, NIT, what's going to happen with the team, who's going to be here next year, when you let all of that go and just get lost for 40 minutes, it's a lot easier to defend pick and rolls and to grab rebounds and not worry about the lack of a big and all the other things that have been an issue this year.
So I don't, excuse me, I don't want to get too nostalgic here, but that was one of the beautiful things. If you go back and listen to what was amazing, and one of the many things that was amazing about Dean Smith and some about Roy Williams as well, is that they would occasionally break into some really high pressure, tense situations with their team to share moments of levity and reset them like that. I always mention I always think about the time that, Dean Smith, coached a team. They lost a game. It was a pretty big game. And he said, there's a million people in China didn't even know we played tonight. And I don't know that necessarily works all the time, but I do think some of the things you alluded to, Sherrell, just providing levity and perspective, might get some of these players back to enjoying ball. Because again, when they're enjoying things, they look so much better, and I feel like they play so much better. They don't have all that butt pucker,
Well, let me ask you the question then. Like, does anybody look like they're having fun? Does anybody look like they're enjoying what they're doing?
No. Against Georgia Tech, those dudes look like they would absolutely rather all be getting colonoscopies without any anesthesia. Like, just it looked like the most they would rather be anywhere else, but they look like they would all rather be standing in line at the DMV for a one window teller, right? It just nothing about what they look. And I'm not trying to go all facial expressions or trying to just psychoanalyze everybody's mood just by their faces, but they didn't look engaged. They didn't look fired up. They didn't look plugged in. Any of those little analogies you want to use, I didn't see any of that.
And in my opinion, it's a lot easier to follow a game plan, or to understand your assignment, or to execute your assignment correctly when you're locked in, when you're having a good time, when it's fun, when it's joyous, when you don't want to let your head coach or whoever down. It's a lot more fun. And so I don't know. I just think it could be a chicken egg situation. They could be looking like that because they're not making shots. But I think, in my opinion, I think it has a lot more to do with the pressure they're placing on themselves. And at some point, you've got to let that go. And I know people don't like to hear it, but I do think Hubert Davis is right when he talks about the outside noise and side stove distractions and all that stuff. I mean, I can imagine what it's like being a Carolina player and having to hear like, "Yo, you're terrible. Like you shot 5 of 16. You let your man blow by you 10 times, and you gave up 20 points to a defender, and you lost by 15 to a team that all the Carolina fans hate." I'd imagine
they are hearing that.
I'm sure they're hearing that from, they're hearing in the locker room. They're like, "Hey, we're not playing well," but then they all have social media, so they see it there. They're hearing it from their friends. They're walking on the yard, and they're like, they hear the whispers like, "Oh man, this team is not good. This team is struggling. Like they hear all that stuff, and if you're a human, which I believe they are, then that stuff is going to affect you one way or the other. It might be subconsciously, but it's going to seep in there. So I think it is all this stuff. It is they need to play better. It is the coaches need to put them in better situations to succeed. And it's also they've got to let the pressure and the angst and all that stuff go and just play basketball, which is why they're, at UNC, what they're there to do.
Yeah, you kind of hope they find some places for respite this week or some places to release those pressure valves so that, they can go back to enjoying things. Because I guarantee you nobody wants it more than the guys inside the Smith Center. I mean, all the fans and all of us that cover the team, we can all want what we want, but there's no way we have as much on the line and as much invested as they have. So that they want to right this ship pretty quickly. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into our 2 cents. I'll let each one of you throw a penny at me while I tell everybody how awesome our friends at Congruity are. Matt at congruityhr.com. Use that email address. Use it. Email Matt at congruityhr.com. Matt's going to queue you up with a really solid, informative assessment about your smaller and medium-sized business. And what that assessment is going to do, it's going to take a look at where they may be able to save you some money, where they may be able to save you some time, where they may be able to help your business run more smoothly and efficiently, which means you're saving stacks, which means you're saving moolah, you're saving young money or old money. I don't know. Whatever the kids might say. If you're not getting an assessment from Congruity, that's sus. That's sus. Don't be sus. All right? Go ahead and call Congruity, email Congruity, get in touch with Congruity HR. You will be glad you did. They will help you get back to focusing on profits and revenue and the things that you really got into business for. You won't be sorry you did. Let them take care of you now so that you don't have to worry about it in Q1 of 2025. That's Congruity HR. We love their sponsorship of this here show and other Inside Carolina content. Shout out to them. Great friends of Inside Carolina. All right, Sean, I'm going to you first. Give me a penny, man. Give me one good thing from your thoughts that will help us get close to wrapping this show.
Oh, I'd say this week with the scheduling, LaSalle hopefully can be a quote-unquote get right game for the team in terms of it's a team that one didn't realize Fran Dunphy had been the coach for 3 years, the longtime Temple coach, but they play fast, so that will
common opponent, American.
But yeah, that American game is probably skewing a lot of UNC's offensive and defensive rankings in general. But they like to play fast, and I think in terms of a lot of possessions, it should be a little more free flowing that can hopefully get the crowd into it. In terms of Elliot Cadeau, hopefully get him into it. You saw it to an extent at the end, which I thought he played well at the end of the game, minus that pass to Washington, but he hit the three and had some assists. It's not his fault. Withers missed a great alley-oop dunk, etc. But, for him, I think he needs to look more at that pull-up jump shot, the one he hit against Alabama last year in the tournament to get him that first shot. But in that mid-range, which I know everybody wants the layups and threes, but I think that's where his bread and butter could be just to get going a little bit. But between him and then you have Drake Powell, trying to get him cutting to the basket, some off-ball action. So what are all these little things that can be worked on in that LaSalle game where, once again, on a weekend, hopefully get the energy and get that confidence back, especially going into that Florida game, which will be almost a home game in Charlotte and a must win between that and UCLA, if not both. But
and should be a good pro UNC crowd, by the way.
Yep. So the mistakes aren't going to be as magnified during that game. Now, obviously, we saw what happened with Elon, where you're messing around up 10 to 12 points, and all of a sudden you're down. But I think it should be a game where you can try out a few things and ideally get the wheels flowing into that next week, which is going to be really important. So right now you have a week, finals practice, etc., and then ideally a game that can be a little more joyous and not as stressful as what the last five have been.
Love it. Sean, thank you for your penny. Sherrell, I would like one more penny to complete our 2 cents, brought to you by Congruity.
Well, I just want to throw this out there first. It's it's an interesting situation because whenever you hear a stat that compares something to 8-20, aka 2001, 2002, I think alarm bells should start.
I'm getting ready to hit the dump button on you, bro.
Just no, I'm just saying they should start flashing like insanely loud, insanely bright. I was looking at the defensive efficiency numbers, which is basically how many points you give up per 100 possessions, and the three worst in school history. Obviously, there's a long way to go in this season. The three worst in the Ken Palm era in school history were 8-20, were 2020, where UNC did not miss the tournament. They just didn't go to the tournament. They didn't miss it. They just didn't go. And this season. So the only two seasons worse than this from a defensive efficiency standpoint thus far were two seasons where North Carolina didn't play in the NCAA tournament. So that is extremely worrying, I think, if you're a Carolina fan or someone who's listening to this. The other thing I would say, a friend of mine is going to get upset with me for saying this, but on a positive note, it's kind of like, can they play any worse?
Nowhere to go but up, baby.
Yeah, I think that's the answer if you're looking for some positivity because we try to be balanced on the show. I think you see that Ian Jackson is ascending. I think Seth Trimble has blown away everybody's expectations. He's been North Carolina's by far most consistent all-around player this entire season. I think Joey Powell continues to ascend. And I think Van Allen Lubin has carved out a nice niche as kind of tough rebounding physical guy. He's got to get smarter with his fouls and those kind of things. But I think you add that and you say, well, if Elliot Cadeau gets back to where he was a couple of weeks ago and improves, and R.J. Davis, he doesn't have to go to All-American, Superman level R.J. Davis. If he can just go back to junior year R.J. Davis, then I think North Carolina can have a shot to start making a little noise and turn some things around. But I think we all should realize that this season is in great peril. If people didn't, this is not a situation where it's like, oh, they'll be fine, they'll win 12 straight. No, like they're in some trouble already. They're gonna have to win some Q1 games. They're gonna have to win some games they shouldn't just to make the tournament. So like we all need to recalibrate. And I think maybe a month ago it was like, oh, ceiling is they can make the Final Four, or it was like second weekend maybe. And now I think you kind of have to recalibrate to like, can they make the tournament? I think they can. But like I said, those kind of things are going to have to happen where Cadeau and Davis play better, and you have the continued ascension of the freshmen.
Yeah, I think all of that is accurate. And I do think there will be some opportunities to, like Sean said earlier, beat Florida. It's another chance to get a really good win. Find a way to win some of these games that are coming up and get yourself some confidence, get yourself another role. Sherrell, what you got?
Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say too. The schedule is insane. Like we
That's
can all
brutal.
say that we're not making excuses, but we can say this is a really tough schedule. And in the future, I'd like to see them. I think we talked about this before. Game the net, play in Charlotte, play in Greensboro, play in Fayetteville, play in Winston-Salem, play in Norfolk, play in Richmond. Just like play these semi-neutral games that will give you a chance to get a Q1 win because they consider it a neutral court. So I just hope the scheduling moving forward is a little less meaty because this one is just it hasn't really given the team a chance to grow, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's absurd. And again, the fact that it was all stacked earlier in the year, I think may be what has kind of knocked them back a little bit because they had so many really marquee opponents. And it would have been nice to win a couple of those games for the Tar Heels, but they had a lot of just real consecutive adversity packed into a tight window. So it's going to be amazing to see how they rebound, how they react to it, and how they play out this string. I like Sean's consideration of just, hey, see what LaSalle does for you. Stack a win wherever you can get one, and maybe start building back, knowing that the ACC schedule is not going to help you at all. You might see 2, maybe 3 quad 1 opportunities in the ACC as I look at it right now, just based on KenPom ratings. But and speaking of UCLA, they beat Oregon today at Oregon. So something else to think about. North Carolina is going to get on their schedule. UCLA may not be the UCLA of old, but they were good enough to beat a top 15 Oregon team today. So, guys, I'm thankful for you being a part of the show as always. I appreciate everybody who else has joined us as we do this live. If you're catching us later on, thank you. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you put those notifications on so you can find out when we are going to go live. If you're worried about a football coaching scenario, go ahead and join Open Premium. I know Ben and the rest of the staff have been absolutely just glued into this and sourcing everything they possibly can. IC's not going to be one to break stuff just to break it. Like, we're going to make sure that it's accurate. We're going to make sure that it's a gold standard. So if you're going to get information about the coaching search, you know where to find us. Follow us on social. Make sure you're plugged in. And if you're not a premium subscriber, go ahead and do that. Make it now. Coaching searches don't happen often, and that's usually the best time. So make sure you're getting the information that you want to get. We appreciate all of you who joined us in the chat tonight. Shout out to everybody who's listening to this later on. For Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, we're grateful for John Siegley for producing, to Congruity and Johnny T-shirt for sponsoring. But until next time, I am Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast on InsideCarolina.com. Late.